talking about a subject here which is fundamental to pretty much all music and forms the basis of chord construction and all sorts of other stuff. So it's an important thing, without diving too far into the theory books, to at least have a grasp of. I think it's only going to possibly make your life easier as a player and not more difficult. So we're going to talk about the major scale and how it's constructed. Now, major scale has a very familiar sound to most of us. Okay. Now, wherever we start that scale, it should sound the same. And so on and so forth. So in other words, there must be something in common between the makeup of all the things that I just played. And what that is the gaps or intervals between the notes. Now, when you recognise a tune, what you generally recognise is the gaps between the notes or the chords. So the relative positions of those things. So, for example, if I said, well, okay, I'm going to play... Okay, you're going to say, well, that sounds like Dock of the Bay. You didn't say to yourself, oh, why is he playing it in G? So in other words, wherever I play that, it's recognisable because the chords are the same distance away from each other. Now, what happens when you move major scales around from one starting point to another is very interesting because you get a different selection of black and white notes happening depending on where you start. Now, most obviously, the thing to do is to start where we haven't got any, which is a C scale. It happens to be all the white notes on a piano. So C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Okay, so I want us to define that scale in a way which is not key specific. In other words, we want a formula for that scale which applies wherever we start it. So I think the first thing we could say is there are 7 different letter names. The second thing we can say is there's a pattern there of tones and semitones, or whole and half steps. Now, the easiest way to remember this, I think, is to divide that scale up into what are called tetrachords. Now, that is effectively half a scale. So the first tetrachord would be, and the next would be. Okay, so we've got 2 halves of the scale, and all we have to remember is tone, tone, semitone, tone, tone, semitone, with a tone in between the 2 of them. Okay? Okay. Or whole step, half step, whole step, half step, with a whole step in between. Okay, tone, tone, semitone, tone, tone, semitone, tone in between. So that's how that works out in C. If we try doing the same thing from G and we go, okay, so G to A is a tone, A to B is a tone, B to C is a semitone. Okay, so that's good. C to D is a tone, that's our tone in the middle. D to E is a tone, E to F is a semitone. Oh dear, that's not right, is it? And then F to G is a tone. Well, okay. So we need to raise the F to F sharp. So now, this doesn't sound right. Okay, so we've now got an F sharp. So. If something's written in the key of G, it will traditionally have an F sharp written on the stave at the beginning of that piece of music. Or, if it's its relative minor, E minor, it would have the same thing. That's another video. Okay. There are a couple of things we can learn from that. Okay, I think the first thing we can say is that the new sharp, if you like, or the addition, is on the 7th note, isn't it? G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. Now, if something happens happens in one place in music, it happens everywhere else. And what I mean by that is, G scale is the fifth of the C. So if we went to the fifth of a G, which would be D, and we add a seventh tone onto it, in other words, we put a sharp in the seventh tone and retain what we already had, that should work out okay. So that would give us D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, D. Okay, now you can probably see how this is going to work out, and there's copious amounts of stuff on this about the cycle of fifths and all that stuff, which sounds like some secret society, doesn't it, from one of those sort of Da Vinci Code type of novels. It's just a way of remembering stuff. So if you went in a cycle of fifths, you go C, G, D, A, E, B, F sharp, which is the same thing as G flat, then G flat, D flat, A flat, and so on and so forth. But it's really just a way of remembering key signatures and how many sharps or not there are. So that's fine. But we're going to leave that to one side. That's a lot to carry around in your head, and this will all get a lot simpler very shortly. But I'll come to that in a second. Okay. If we went the other way, in other words, if we went backwards through that sequence, and we said, well, okay, well, what if we went to the fourth of the C instead of the fifth? In other words, back to an F. F, G, A, B, C. Well, that doesn't sound right. Well, now we've got to flatten the B to get the right sound. So what an F scale has in it that a C scale doesn't is a B flat. And what a G scale has in it that a C scale doesn't have is an F sharp. So those, what might appear to be relatively subtle differences between those scales, are actually massively useful to us as players and improvisers. Okay, but for the moment now, we don't want to try and take in too many bits of information at the same time. We just need to appreciate, don't hear about the cycle of fifths and all that stuff. Just say to yourself, well, there are differences between one key and another, and we're going to be making use of those as we go along. But I'll come back to that in due course. Anyway, thanks very much for watching. That's about it for now. So if you could hit the subscribe button, that would be great. And bye for now.